And now we're going to get into the big one, which is our Last of Us 2 Spoilercast. So we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about basically anything and everything, story-wise, gameplay-wise. And if you haven't played the game and you're looking to not be spoiled, this would be the time to tune out. We're not going to cover anything after this, so you can stop the podcast and wait for our next one. But if you're interested and you want to stick around, we're going to get right into it. So I'm going to start with 30 minutes. I know that's going to be nowhere near enough time, but I've scheduled 100 hours, so we can see what we can fit in between 30 minutes and 100 hours. So here we go. Ooh. I don't even know where to start, really. I think I will just I guess I'll start by introducing how we each experienced the game, because each of us experienced it in a very different way. Lee played it in a more traditional setting, I'd say. Just kind of running through it like you normally would a game like this. Derek played it on stream on the Voxel YouTube and his Twitch channel, the whole thing, all 25 plus hours of it. And I watched his stream. So I didn't even play it, I just watched. So I do know all the story stuff, and I got a pretty good idea of how it plays, but I haven't actually played it, so I can't chime in too much on that. So I guess we'll just kind of go around and we'll talk about our initial impressions, like what we overall think of the game, and then we can get into specific stuff that we want to discuss. So I guess, Lee, let's start with you on your overall impression of the game. Like, do you like it? Do you not like it? Is it a mixed bag? What do you, how do you feel?
Well, I went in not expecting to like it because I was absolutely not a fan of the first one. Mm-hmm. The hook with the first one for me is I don't actually like playing the first one. And the story is kind of warmed over zombie apocalypse type thing. The hook with that is the characters. But really kind of the sticking point for me was the fact that the gameplay was so rudimentary in the first one. This, when you strip away the story, because you have to, I know people are like, the story is the key with this, but gameplay is a big component. So when you strip away the story, the gameplay I find is much better and more satisfying this time around than the first one. It's a little bit more refined in every single way.
I can tell that just watching it being played, that it looks like it's a much better playing game than the first game. That was one of my problems with the first game too. I tried playing it probably 3 separate times and just didn't like the way that it handled the stealth. I didn't like the way that it handled pretty much anything, and the story was fine, but like you said, it was kind of like, for me anyway, a little well-worn territory.
But the thing with the first one is it's kind of pretty much a sort of straight line. The first one, it kind of leads you down a kind of a fairly varied corridor. I think the thing with the gameplay of this one is it drops you into relatively open areas, and it gives you a lot of options within that gameplay for various, which you didn't really have in the first one. Kind of hide for a brick at someone, but this is it's quite well done level design within it, within that kind of broken down, kind of left at one point sort of area, like dilapidated area. It gives you a lot of options to really juice up your own gameplay and play it kind of more than one way as well. There's really the first one gives you a lot of time to kind of play it one way or you're going to die. It would screw you over a lot, the first one, if you didn't play it the stealth way it wanted you to play it. This kind of, at certain points, you could go in various different ways. You can go stealthy, you can go kind of hard, you can kind of fake people out a lot more. I did enjoy this one a lot more. If we're doing a quick consolidated kind of thing, I find this much more of an enjoyable game to control. And I'll say that how you feel when you play it is a different thing entirely, and we'll probably talk about that a bit later.
Yeah,
I think. Yeah.
All right, Derek, what was your impression throughout your experience? I guess I'll call it an experience.
Yeah, we're going to call it an experience because generally that's not the way I would have played the game. It would have been a lot more like relaxed, probably have taken double the amount of time that we did the stream in. But I enjoyed it. Overall, I would say I really enjoyed the game. I understand what they did with some story parts. And in the end, after like thinking about it, after my initial reactions that you see like on the stream and stuff like that, I really liked what it did. Aside from the part that they decided to cram in as many controversial issues as they could into it, which weren't entirely necessary. Where they could have shined a little bit more on the story, but they decided to take the route they did with it, and I think that would be like it's shortfalling. But as Lee had said, it's definitely a hell of a lot better feeling than the first one. It does open up a lot more, and it gives you different styles to play. Like you said, you can go in stealth, or you can kind of go in blazing, or you can kind of mix it up too, because it gives you the tools to be able to do that, to where you can like kind of go in and then you can like make yourself disappear again, and then slowly start taking out. To where the first one was like way more strictly stealth based, and I think like maybe a week or so beforehand I had like loaded up the first one to go back and play on a harder difficulty, and it just was not fun at all. But coming in this one was like, it was much more fine-tuned. Gameplay was really fun. The worlds and the environment and the way it looked were absolutely gorgeous. And I really didn't run into that many, if any, issues with it. I think every now and then I'd have like a little like stutter glitch happen as far as like screen tearing, but that was pretty much it. Nothing really weird or anything.
All right, so for me, all I got really was the story experience, with the exception of, I could tell just by, the way watching it, that it definitely plays better than the first game. At least the parts that I didn't like about the first game. It seems like the stealth is handled a little bit better than the first game, which was really frustrating for me in that game. And as far as the story goes, I think it's more of the bleak post-apocalyptic zombie kind of future that I've personally seen way too much of. It's why I stopped watching The Walking Dead, because I thought it just kind of got repetitive over and over again. Like nothing really original was going on. It was just like a wait and see who the next person is that's going to die kind of thing. But I do like the split they do with the game, where they kind of pull a Metal Gear Solid 2 halfway through and make you play as, Abby as opposed to Ellie the whole time. And kind of give you a different perspective on all of that kind of stuff. I think it's too long. Derek, you kind of managed to blow through that section pretty quickly, but I still think that it kind of dragged on for a little bit too long. Just from a seeing as a purely viewing pacing situation, And then I think the ending, like I understand it obviously, but I think I would have been more satisfied if it ended with Dina and Ellie, just living happily ever after at their camp, their house. I think that would have been a completely fine ending for me anyway. Yeah, that's probably my take on it, mostly story focused, obviously, because Also, how did Tommy survive?
He got shot in the cheek, didn't he?
No, he didn't get shot in the cheek. Jesse
Yeah,
was the one that got shot in the face.
yeah, and then
she shoots him on the floor.
She shot him on the side.
No,
No.
She shot him in the face when he fell down.
Lev shoots him in the leg, I believe, with the arrow, and then she caps him in the side of the face, and it just pops his face out of it. And he's kind of like half blind, I believe, in the what should have been what seems like the coda. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that was just very, because I thought for sure that he was just gone. Like,
yeah. No, I thought he was gone too
until he wasn't.
Yep.
Yeah. So, yeah. What do we want? What specific stuff do we want to talk about now? Do we want to get? What's that?
No, go on.
Do we want to just get into the? I mean, we kind of started talking about the ending already. Do we want to explore that and then go backwards?
Well, we could go through to the ending, I guess. We could start with kind of whether it sets, because there's an argument, and there has been an argument to say whether it's a badly set up story going in more than it is going out. I've seen that argument quite a lot, and I don't necessarily agree with it, but I do recognise that a lot of people feel like it's based upon something very flimsy. And I really don't agree with that kind of. Is there flimsiness possibly to the way it ends up? Maybe. But I think it's a story that kind of, it makes sense that it plays out the way it does as a story, I think.
I think it started off strong. I think it had a good start to it. The middle got kind of shaky, and I think it could have ended better.
It all really based upon how you feel about these characters from the first one. And it's definitely ambiguous the way the thing ends, how you feel about Joel. We know how the first one ends, right? Kind of. Yeah. So obviously he wipes out the people that could have potentially, the last neurosurgeons in the world, to save her. But it's ambiguous as to whether kind of he really sees Ellie as Ellie, or whether he sees Ellie as an extension of Sarah. And there's a weird conflict there, whether he's doing it for her or doing it for him. And it's best not really to take Ellie, because Ellie takes a very strange turn in this one where she's quite ruthless. And there doesn't seem to be any kind of any indication that she's ruthless in the main game of The Last of Us 1. But there is in what's the spin-off?
Left Behind, where it tells the story where she's kind of protecting Joel.
Yeah, mixed with the kind of, there's the innocence of what she is when she's with a friend that she's attracted, and there's the kind of a weird brutality of the things she's learned from Joel that she takes when she's trying to save him, and she's absolutely kind of taken everyone out, which is kind of the element you see in this one. There's much more of the way she is in Left Behind at those Joel sections than there is of her in the main game of Last of Us 1. So kind of it makes sense going into that.
So in Left Behind, you play as Ellie.
Yes, it's all Ellie.
Okay.
So
All right.
there's a part in The Last of Us one where Joel gets gravely injured, and he's wiped out till winter. So there's you see kind of the way Ellie is when she's more innocent, and then you see her kind of scavenge to go and get the things to save Joel.
Yeah.
In the interim that you don't see in the main game. So yeah, so you look at that going in to the second one, and you sort of it depends on whether you see that thing in Joel that is kind of Joel did maybe the right thing kind of for him, but not necessarily for absolutely anybody else, because everything that kind of Joel does has a kind of ramification now, if that makes sense, or what is now in the game. Kind of, that weird sort of the Fireflies weren't great, but they were meant to be kind of the hope. And Joel essentially wiping those out has made a lot of awful people spring up in their absence. So kind of while they're all sitting there doing their rustic thing at the beginning, where everything seems to be fine, but Ellie's not particularly happy, and kind of it's all a bit of a fabrication. So kind of Joel had it coming. I would honestly say Joel had it coming. Did I want to see it? No. Did I need to see it? No. But kind of it's there. That's the hard thing. I mean, that tells you when you drop in or drop out. I think when you see him go and you realise it's going to be kind of a kind of a one note thing for Ellie. And it is very one note thing for Ellie. I think that's why arguably Ellie's thing drags a little bit, because it's just a straight line. It's a straight grim line of kind of revenge, isn't it? Yeah. And it does make it a bit of a chore to get through. I mean, this is a particularly grim dystopia we put them in. I mean, there's Walking Dead, and then there's kind of, this is more like The Road. Have you ever seen The Road?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I like that sort of, that's where it might turn some people off, and they're like, that's too glum. I like The Road. I've seen The Road. Like, I'm one of those weirdos that see The Road more than once. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
I'm a weirdo like that. I got through 2 boxes of tissues with The Road, and I didn't cry once. Think about that.
I think for like the beginning part 2, one of the things that I like that they did was they didn't right away like allude to why she was so mad at him in the beginning of the game, as it was leading up to essentially his death. That they kind of explained it later on. I like that because at least for me, it gave me that wonder of like, all right, what's going on? Did she find out? How'd she find out? What exactly is going on? Because you have like the little back and forth where she's angry and then she kind of starts forgiving him, and then it leads into what happens with his death and all. So it gave you that kind of like wonder, which it waited till a good, if I can remember, it was a good bit of way into the game until it gave like that flashback.
Yeah, it was a ways, yeah.
I'll tell you something interesting about that I just found out. Well, go on, carry on, sorry.
Oh no, that's just kind of what I was saying to add into like that part that you were talking about, since it kind of like tied in like with that little section is I think if they would have explained that earlier, it would have been like a completely different feel for the death and everything, because I think like, the whole beginning sets up for that happening. And I think if you would have known that there, you kind of would have felt a little bit differently about that scene.
There's a weird thing that I've just found out, because I've been listening to a lot of these things, and Druckmann, who wrote it, has been talking about stuff that was meant to be in the game but was cut at the last minute. And there's that scene, that horrible scene where kind of Joel dies. And the thing they cut out from that thing that we don't see is as he's he's obviously his brain's gone because he's been beaten to death, and he looks at he's looking at Ellie, and all he can say is Sarah, which gives it another weird layer, another weird kind of can't let it rest layer to the whole thing. That's an interesting thing. Kind of, there's still a non-reconciliation because you always get that idea that it's an uneasy father-daughter relationship through the whole thing, even through the flashbacks. Oh God, we get to the flashbacks, Jesus. So I always get there's an unease to the thing that isn't just to do with you lied to me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's kind of like his overprotectiveness and stuff like that. Like, I think those parts like completely made sense, which kind of gave you that feel. Because kind of even with the first one, like Sarah is a good like push to why he's like so hell bent on making sure this journey happens, and then that breaking point at the end of the first game where he goes back in to save her. That's all predominant there.
When he dies, and she goes back to his house to go and clear his stuff out, you go through and you pick things up and you remember things that you did with Joel. And then you go upstairs and you see a picture of Joel with Sarah and Joel with Ellie. And it won't let you pick up the Ellie picture. It will only let you pick up the Sarah picture. It won't let you look at the other one where you're with him, which I think is kind of, it's all weirdly layered in, all that sort of stuff. Yeah. I don't know if you noticed that you wasn't able to pick the other picture up, even though you probably wanted to look at it.
No, I don't think I did, but like one of the things too is I can't wait to do another playthrough of this to where I can actually, just go bit by bit as I want to and take as much time or blow through something as fast as I do versus how we did it for the stream.
But yeah, so it is very bleak getting through, but I guess, I don't know. How did you feel watching it, Ryan? That one note kind of mission through the 3 days.
Yeah, like I said, it seemed like that part, the Ellie's part, dragged on a lot longer than Abby's part, and I don't know if that was because you actually went through it faster, or it was because there was it was less of a. I think it's just longer. People say that it's an even amount of time, but thinking about all the stuff that happened in either one, and I think the Ellie section is longer. Not only mostly because you have that open world section where you can kind of explore at your own will. It's not huge and there isn't a whole lot to do there, but it is a kind of however long you want to spend in here, you can, versus the rest of it, which is more or less a linear shot through the game.
It's kind of a bit of a gameplay lie, that first area, isn't it? It leaves you to think it's all going to be like that, and it literally does that once.
Yeah, I was expecting there to be at least one or two more sections like that, and then there weren't. So it's a little strange to have that in there and then not. And I also don't think they did anything particularly great with it. It just felt like more of like the all the little stores and houses you go through the main game just kind of spread out across this big open field area. You're still just finding notes that kind of fill in a little bit of the lore, which I think is kind of like a more or less a kind of a cheap way to do that kind of storytelling. And yeah, it's just like you're still just finding, you're opening up filing cabinets and finding duct tape in it and, ammo here and there and stuff like that. So yeah, I just didn't, overall, after you were done with it, Derek, I was just like, that was it. That's all that was going on there. There wasn't anything more significant. But yeah, that's just what it seemed like from my perspective.
Yeah, and like with that, part of it too is like the play style between the two characters is Ellie kind of retains that like more stealthy approach to stuff to
Hmm.
where, Abby's a trained soldier pretty much. And with her, she's built in the way her weapons are and the weapons she has access to gives you that more fast pace. So it definitely
Yeah.
changed when switching over. It changed the pacing of the game to where you could play more like run and gun, a little bit more fast paced without worrying as much. To where, if you tried to do that with Ellie at some points, you would just eventually get like worn down and stuff.
Yeah.
Ruined, yeah.
Yeah, I think the gameplay styles are different between the two exactly.
Mm.
Just based on the arsenal of weapons you have. Like Derek just said, you have a very different set of weapons for the most part.
I think a lot of this kind of thing with the sort of exploration, sort of not, is how you feel about or how much you take on board of the design of the game, kind of the aesthetic design or the conceptual design of the game. Whether you enjoy going through these areas and seeing exactly when the world stopped. I think it's one of the best games I've seen that does that, where you kind of
Hmm.
see how everything just stopped and then nature took over and starts to kind of. It's interesting to see that weird kind of environmental storytelling. It's probably one of the best games I've seen that does that. But whether you want to get propelled with the game or not, it kind of doesn't really apart from that first area, it pushes you through that. So kind of you don't get to really kind of experience that as much on Ellie's side as you maybe do on. So it just becomes a corridor after a while. You don't really
Right.
you want to quickly nip in and kind of get all your resources and grab your bandages and shit, but you don't really want to hang around and just soak all that stuff in. Um, so it's kind of a bit of a waste in that first section. I think it's far more interesting to see the world in Abby's section. I think and
Yeah.
just spend time in her world. The dilapidated buildings and the way the offices went out and stuff like that. And I find all that stuff fascinating.
Yeah. I totally
Mm,
agree with that too. Like we were talking as we were going, since you were able to stay ahead of me, like
mm.
some of those levels that you went through with Abby were like some of the best in the game.
Oh,
And they were
God, yeah.
just they were horrifying. They
Mm,
were a blast to play through, and they just looked fucking amazing.
yeah.
To where the open world, it was kind of open. You kind of like the downer of like the beginning part was like with Ellie, once you like are setting out, um, it's it's all open, but you're doing like the same thing in these little like squared off sections,
Mm,
ultimately to kind of be led to that one spot, and then from there you start branching out. Um, and then it becomes kind of a little bit more linear to where those
mm,
open areas really didn't get to shine as much as they could have. Like,
no.
I think like going into the bank was awesome. How it was, like broken down to the side of the hill and everything was kind of overgrown and you had to work your way down. Um,
Mm,
I think if they would have had like maybe more stuff like that out there or kind of like reworked that beginning area, maybe a
mm,
little bit tighter, but more stuff like that, I think it could have shined a little bit more than it actually did.
yeah. Mm. It's a weird one note section, Ellie. But then it's meant to be one note. She's on a one
Yeah.
note mission. Like that where she's with Jesse. And it's like we can totally go and save Tommy. It's like no, and she's basically just used kind of go and save Tommy as an excuse to everyone. And kind
Hmm.
of so the one noteness, I guess, does play into it, but that also depends on how you buy into that sort of storytelling. Because as much that is kind of cool storytelling, you've still got to play it, and that is still going to be possibly dull to some people. I get what they're going for, but it can be a drag because it is just one kind of bleak trudge through the 3 days. So it's like, oh, geez.
Hmm.
Strange. It's
Um,
strange.
and then to like kind of come on like what Ryan was talking about with like the notes and
Mm,
stuff we were finding along the way.
mm,
Um, I think that was like it was kind of a hit miss type deal because
mm,
I'm gonna use like the notes for Isaac. they built him up so well within all these notes and stuff that we were finding about him and on the different soldiers and stuff as
Mm.
you're making your way through. And then
Mm.
once you finally have him there as a tangible, character who's in front of you,
Mm.
he just falls so short.
Yeah,
And I
that sort
think,
of. Cool.
yeah, I was just say like with the game of whole, I think that's like the couple spots where they fell short, where like they didn't utilize him, which could have been really great because he has this whole huge ass area set up and is the main driving force of what's happening over here.
Mm.
And then the other thing is once they actually once they mention what it was about Ellie that could have been used to save humanity,
Mm-hmm.
that's it. You now
Mm.
know that it's a parasite type deal in her head. There's some
Yeah.
sort of organism in her head.
Mm.
But that's it. They don't go into it anymore.
Mm.
They
Yeah.
just keep on with this whole back and forth revenge story and just back and forth it so much.
There's nowhere else to go with it, though, is there? Because everybody that could do anything about with that is dead. They are the last neurologists in the world. They state that. So there is nowhere else to go with that. What can you do with the parasite thing? Because there's no one else smart enough to kind of run with it, I guess. That's why they didn't pursue it any further, I guess.
Yeah, maybe.
They're the last. There
Yeah.
is no one else after that. That's what's so heinous about what Joel did. Kind of that was their last shot. They're the only people left that can smart enough to do this, I guess.
Yeah.
Once you've got that, who else is there to tell the story kind of on a face-to-face value, I guess?
And I think that's like one of the parts that give into this too, which allows the whole revenge thing to completely play out is as far as overall world building, we still even between two games hardly know anything about the zombies or whatever you want to call them, the reanimated. We have some new types that have showed up now. We don't know why or how they've mutated or exactly. So, like, that whole wonder is there, which left me to continuously saying as we were going through that stream to say, I think if they wanted another game, it would need to be a prequel about Day Zero or whatever they want to call it.
Yeah.
About the whole start of the outbreak or the whole downfall of civilization. I think if they want to go ahead with another game, that could be the only way.
Yeah, I think if they look at that more conceptually than they do scientifically. I think it's like it's kind of, that's probably the one noteness of the first game is kind of, it's not really a scientific thing. It's more Druckmann saying kind of, it's nature's time again. And that's as far as he really goes with it. Yes, he's kind of playing on like survival horror tropes. More than he'd like to admit that he is, I think. I think he thinks he's making something a little bit more important than that. But you've still got the same sort of notes. You've still got the same sort of kind of set pieces. But yeah, it's more of a...
This one especially, I had huge like Resident Evil vibes at a lot of moments watching Derek play.
And it totally should have played into that in the first one. Maybe that's what makes the first one so dry. That it's trying to be that thing. It is trying to be that thing. But it wants to steer away from that, so it keeps it very bog standard. This one leans into that kind of that set piece, survival horror stuff a lot more. And is a lot more successful as a gameplay experience for it. Sequence in the hospital with what's her name? Abby in Ground Zero, where you like the Source and you get the Rat King and stuff like that. One of the best sequences I've seen in that sort of game. They should have just leaned into it in the first one, really, because just to be what you are. If you're a genre game, you're a genre game. We've already got a game where it's supposed to be ultra realistic in some sense. We'll ignore the monsters, but in some sense. But you've also got a radar, like a sonar, like you're a bat. So it's kind of, it's very weird with the way it wants to play its realism with its gaminess. if that makes sense.
But the thing with that, which I guess we can pop into a little bit mechanic-wise right now, is having that sonar turned in is one of the plethora of things it gives people with it gives accessibility to play it. So maybe you have some sort of disability or something, but then having this little feature helps you. There's a ton of different things that you could alter and customize the game to be the exact experience you want. You know, you can turn all this stuff off and then go completely blind, or you could give yourself the little sonar for an area, or there was even like a bunch of stuff that we really didn't even dive into to fine-tune, customize, and help out different people. So I think that's one of the cool things that they've done with this is you don't see that in a lot of games. Like, yeah, a lot of places have like the standard accessibility options, but I think they kind of went like above and beyond of what they have in there to get this experience out.
Yeah, I would say that. I think of all the things this game does, we probably get into that now, its biggest success is its accessibility for absolutely everybody. Kind of visually impaired, sonically impaired, ambulatorily impaired.
You could even turn off puzzles, right?
Yeah, you can turn off all sorts of things. You can turn off like button mash. You can turn that sort of thing off if you're kind of not quick enough. You can downplay the way the enemies come for you and stuff like that. You can downplay their AI. You can switch off individual parts of their AI if you go into some of the systems. It's really, really kind of that's the best thing about this. And I don't think it's been talked about a little bit at the start, but I think it's been lost a bit. I don't know have you seen much of that stuff, because obviously you didn't play it. You just saw people tinker with it.
I've seen probably as much as you have. I think the thing that stood out the most was like this weird, almost like voxely looking presentation of it, where it was like all gray with highlighted things that, like the enemies and stuff like that were all highlighted in different colors and stuff. But then when Derek went through and pointed out all these things that like you were saying, you can customize the AI to tell them not to flank you, not to do all sorts of different kinds of stuff, and it's neat, and it kind of, you know, and as neat as it is, it also like for somebody that may not need that can totally break the game. Which is, you know, it's kind of like shows their willingness to allow something like that. Like this isn't just some sort of like pristine piece of art that needs to be experienced in one particular way. They're open to the notion that you can kind of customize your experience pretty much as you want. Which is cool, but I imagine it also took a ton of work, and isn't something that is to be expected from every game, I imagine. No. Especially smaller games.
Yeah, it's cool that you can change it on the fly, and it's also cool that it doesn't disable things, doesn't disable rewards like some games do.
Right.
You know, you do that and it kind of, well, you can't get your achievements now because you put on essentially kind of something that makes the game easier, you know, put on infinite ammo or something. So it's cool that they don't punish you for using those things. I like that as well. Kind of that kind of altering of the actual the enemy gameplay is nice.
Yeah, it just kind of cuts out that, you know, that try-hard flexing people have with... I just beat it. Did you really play the game? Did you play it on hard or something like that?
Guilt factor.
Right.
See, I turned on the sonar thing because you could beyond the kind of the focus you get where you see everything in black and white. You can also do a ping which finds either items or or a thing. I turn that on. I don't think that's a weakness. I think that's stuff that kind of was already in the first game to some extent. Also, that thing that Derek didn't realise, where you get a cone that tells you when people are actually seeing you. Which
Oh yeah, the enemy awareness
was just a noise, wasn't it? It was just like you hear a wong, but you don't know where it's coming from.
Yeah.
So it's kind of useless. But that was in the first game where it would give you a little eye icon when things could see you. Or look at...
and it would like slowly fill up to where
Yeah.
this one actually gave you like the direction, and that was super helpful and stuff, especially if you're trying to like learn a new weapon or how it works or the range with it. Because unfortunately, the scopes, at least for Ellie's rifle, was probably the worst mechanic of the game.
Yeah.
Like, it was just, like, I felt like in the one section where you're using it, it just was not, like, you would do a shot, and then you would adjust for your next shot, and it would be completely off from what you thought you adjusted for. Like, thank God for, Ryan with his unlimited ammo spots.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I would have been screwed on a fucking tutorial.
Yeah, the moments where it just all of a sudden you have unlimited ammo, like that truck part where you're driving and you just can't run out of pistol ammo.
Those parts were really fun. I'm glad they put them in there. There was only maybe 2 or 3 of them, but they're actually pretty fun. I enjoyed those sequences.
So, do you want to talk about the protagonist flip?
Sure.
The kind of the halfway through thing. Well, let's say your face when you found out you're going to play her.
Lee watched me die on stream, and he immediately messaged me and was like, "Your face."
Well, I mean, they kind of alluded to it when you played her at the beginning.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't like completely, but that was like 12 hours ago, so you can be forgiven if you've totally forgot that you actually played as her at the beginning of the game.
Yeah,
because it was a very long time ago.
I think the biggest thing. I think the one thing I liked that they did, even though I didn't want to like it, was how they cut it off and flipped it. Like, you're in this middle of this intense ass scene. Jesse just gets shot in the face. Because then I think she aims her gun down then, and then it cuts to a black screen. And then you come into as her waking up, and it was just like, what?
Yeah.
Like, I think the whole transition into that switch was well. And like I said, for me, by the time I finished playing, I kind of changed my feelings as it was happening to how I felt. Like, I'm glad they did it. As you got into it too, she was a ton of fun to play. Her combat style and the more fast pace was a nice feel and touch to everything.
It's a strange.
I think it's from my perspective, it was the stronger level design too.
Oh yeah, hands down.
And more variety to it. You go from, you kind of start in the same looks and stuff, but then going to the island near the end, and then that whole island is on fire, and you're riding the horse through it and everything like that, and in that super intense sniper scene with Tommy where he's sniping you down the highway. There was nothing like that in Ellie's section.
No.
Like nothing even close to that, either of those really. And it was just, in Ellie's, it was just the same kind of gray-green Seattle, rainy and cloudy and shit, and was pretty much the entirety of it. Whereas Abby had much more variety in her environments and stuff like that.
Yeah. It's a weird thing because I watched, like I say, I watched Eric play it, and he reacted to it not narratively. He reacted to it totally emotionally. It's like, well, fuck this. He did. I don't think you had a problem with the story of changing it. It was just like you reacted so kind of vibe-wise to it. Like, I think it's kind of cool in a weird way. It wanted you to do that. That's totally the aim of the game.
And I guess the one thing to mention here too with that is I managed to stay pure as far as going into playing it. I did not watch anything. All I knew was when it was coming out, that it was coming out, and I think maybe I saw the trailer during E3 or whatever. I stayed away from the leaks. I stayed away from anybody talking about it. I stayed away from any YouTube videos that I'd normally watch on games and coverage of it. I stayed away of everything coming up to it. So when Ryan was like, hey, and presented the idea of doing it like this, I was like, oh, hell yeah, this will, it's going to be a completely new experience, but it's going to be completely genuine to what you're seeing of me through the webcam, because I didn't know anything that's going on with it. Like, nothing.
So, like, so the Abby thing was part of the leak.
Yeah.
So was Joel dying was in the leak. But no context. So that's kind of like was the big problem with the leak, was that it was just kind of like those points and not like any information around how it leads up to Joel, like when does it actually happen? Why are you playing as Abby? Who is Abby? And stuff like that. And so the reaction by people was very much like just the very idea, and not so much like, is there justification for it?
What's strange is that's still sort of kind of the view. Despite the fact people who played it, I think they reacted so kind of, which is not, it's an individual thing. I'm not going to slate people for it. The fact that people kind of took that on board so much, I don't think they could look past it. I think maybe. Yeah. Maybe it's a tough ask. Maybe it's something you can't pull with video games because it's not done often. I'll say this for a game that was kind of so well respected first time. To kind of go into your second game in a franchise and completely upend everything, it's a ballsy move. It's a ballsy. It is, because look at the reaction to it. The reaction has kind of been, I'll give them credit. They didn't play the easy game. They didn't play the safe game.
That's why when I first started about it, I made the comparison to Metal Gear Solid 2, because that's exactly what they did with that game. Was total. I mean, even sooner than they did with this game, with Last of Us 2, they were like, even in the. Well, yeah, I guess so. Even in like the previews for Last of Us 2, it was just, gameplay with Ellie. Leading up to Metal Gear Solid 2 was just the tanker part of that game where you're playing as Snake, and then surprise, you're not playing as Snake throughout the next like 90% of the game.
People are still,
people still whine and complain about that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely a thing that a gamer thing, as you will.
Yeah. But I think the whole thing about that second section kind of explains the game more than the first one does. The whole of Abby's journey kind of is is kind of the key to the game. Abby does what she does, and then you pick up with her after she's done what she does. And through those 3 days where she's kind of going through her timeline until she gets to wherever she gets to, she's just doing her thing. While Ellie's going on this rampage, the universe doesn't care in a weird way. And it's kind of the kind of the point, in a weird way, the point is the triviality of that revenge cycle and the violent cycle. You know,
Mhm.
kind of the world just carries on. You know, you can go there on your little journey, but it doesn't really matter. And it only really kicks in when you get to the end and you see the ramifications. That's the first time she even thinks about Ellie again. Is when she hits the aquarium and she sees everybody dead. And it's kind of, I guess that's the key of it, really. And then it sets it all off again. Yeah,
And then you kind of have that again at the very end, where Abby looks down at Ellie, who, when she's tied to that piece of wood, and she's just like, "You, like I haven't thought about you in however long, right?"
6 months, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, why are you here again?
There's that other whole narrative as well, where kind of Abby, so much stuff is made of this, and it makes me angry. So I'm just going to talk about what she does, where she's kind of, you see her as a kid, and you see Abby after her dad's been killed, and then she's like, I'm going to get this guy that has kind of taken out an entire kind of team of people. So she kind of gets herself in, I need to tear up this one guy army thing, and she builds herself up so she can take Joel on, you know, and she's kind of, she's ripped and stuff. As soon as she's done what she's done, she lets that go, and you see her get smaller and smaller as the game goes on, if that makes sense. By the time you see her,
she was definitely like nothing when you got to the end there.
She lets that, but even when you see her in Santa Barbara before she gets captured, she's a lot smaller than she was. She's let that go. In a weird way, Abby is the most kind of weirdly sympathetic character, or the weirdly most giving character. In a weird way. There's times when she teeters over the edge when she's pushed, but it's easier to pull her back than it is to pull Ellie back, if that makes sense. It just takes a word from Lev to let it go, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, don't. And then she's like, you're right, don't. She lets her go. So I actually found Abby the most interesting character. I found her quite, especially her connection with Lev and her willingness to kind of take them in is kind of, I found it quite, I know she's been a controversial character, but I actually really enjoyed her. Derek just wanted to die all the way through. But I quite liked her. Derek, do you want to talk about her wanting to die?
Yeah. No, I really did want her to die. Even though, like I said, I did enjoy playing as her. I think playing as her was necessary to how they told the story. But I did ultimately want to see her die. But like as Ryan said, if it would have ended with Dina and Ellie in the house and that was the end of the game right there, I would have been satisfied. Maybe if we had like a little snippet of what happened with Abby and Lev, because I really enjoyed Lev as a character. That would have been a great ending. The fact that they had to like rekindle the entire game and then pack it into this little quick like hour or two segment to then finish off the game, I think was highly unnecessary.
In pretty much the same way that they finished it off the first time.
Yeah.
Except Ellie's in an even worse situation because now Dina and the kid are gone.
Yep.
And now she can't play the guitar either.
Yeah, but that's letting Joel go, isn't it? Losing those fingers, losing the ability. That's kind of storytelling.
Yeah, that's what that was all about. But she could have done that by like putting the guitar in a closet.
But
she didn't have to lose fingers and go on a 2-hour or a 6-month rampage to do that, to drive that point home, right?
But it's what they all do, though. It's what they all do. Tommy did it. Once they're detached from kind of their grounding, they kind of just go weird. They go odd. It's kind of Tommy's wife is what grounds him. Once he's removed from his wife, he turns into the lunatic that's shooting people on the pier. Do you know what I mean? And he keeps it going. Once he's not with her, he just keeps it going. I've found out where she is and stuff. It's almost like that grounding thing kind of doesn't work for them. Yeah, if that makes sense. And when she goes, I think the problem with the end is it'd be better if it wasn't so truncated. Maybe if they'd make the end have a little bit more. It felt rushed. I think that's the problem with that.
It did, and that whole encounter, like she was just tied up for who knows how long on that post, and she was able to fight like that and last that long after. No, the first couple times she got cut or stabbed or hit, that would have been the end of it.
All we know is they're slavers now. Why are they slavers? Who are they? How long have they been there? Why have they captured her? Why do they keep them there for so long? Why do they put them to the... Yeah, it all feels too squished. If they'd have let that breathe, maybe, it would have been a longer game. But the ends doesn't... Between kind of them getting off the boat and them fighting at the boat, it just feels a bit kind of squished.
Yeah,
and I think doesn't feel earned.
They could have used the first ending. They could have held their second ending, beefed it up a little bit more, flushed it out a little bit more, made it a better experience, and released it as a DLC.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people have the argument that Abby's side should be the third game. I think that whole Santa Barbara thing could have been the third game, maybe. You know, you leave the second game with her going off to find her, and then the third game, or like the DLC for the third game is her going to find her. Yeah, I get that. Yeah. But
yeah, it did some cool things. It did some things that made you wonder. I personally think it tried to push like too many controversial issues and stuff. Like,
do you?
With like the killing of the pregnant lady, the whole lesbian and all that kind of stuff, the completely unnecessary sex scenes to the thing.
I don't know.
They just added a bunch of stuff that weren't necessary to where they could have flushed out other stuff a lot better.
That's Ellie's character, though. That's set up that she's gay.
Like I said, that's
left behind.
That's not a problem at all. The problem is like how much they have it up in your face.
Oh, I didn't find
like at least that's how I felt.
Yeah, I think the only time it's really up in your face, as if you want to call it up in your face, is when it's a little cliche the way the drunken bartender has a pop at them, and that's the only thing that felt a little bit cliche. It could have been better done. I was all right with it. I was okay with Lev. You know, Lev is a situation where we took Lev identifies as a boy.
Yeah.
That's.
And I think that was done well, because remember, I was confused at one point, and I was like, wait a minute.
It says more about.
Once they explained it, it well.
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh, okay, cool, this totally makes sense now. Okay, I get this back and forth that happened.
Because it's narrative, whereas the original beef wasn't narrative. This is narrative, the way the Seraphites are fundamentalists and the way they treat, and because obviously they can't be a overly young wife now. Because it's like it's abhorrent to them, so it kind of I thought that worked in. I just think maybe that the first thing with Ellie at the very beginning of the game is a little probably a little bit cliche. I think that's the problem, I guess. You know, the way the reaction. I think it's like, oh, you were kissing in my bar. It's like, oh, come on.
Well, yeah, they didn't really. So when I first saw that, obviously at the end you kind of see the whole dance and kiss scene play out like the night before, which you didn't see. And then that's where the old guy was like, he calls him a dyke and everything like that. But previously, that's not what I was thinking that guy was upset about. No. Remember, we were thinking that, is Dina really sleeping around with this many people?
Yeah.
No,
like, she's sleeping with Jesse. She's sleeping with Ellie. She's sleeping with this old guy. That's what I thought was like the conflict there, and I think that's what they kind of set up the weirdness of that situation in the first place, is that Dina's kind of like bouncing between, well, it ends up being Jesse and Ellie, but and I think that's where they went with it, instead of necessarily making it strange about, or doubling down on the lesbian, or in Dina's case bi angles. And then of course you find out that the kid is obviously Jesse's at the end. But I totally missed the Dina pregnant part. I missed that during your streams or something, that was the reason why she was staying behind, was because she was pregnant. But
yeah, that doesn't come up till they get to the theater. They kind of drop it in on you.
Yeah,
because it's after you do, like, it was that like running scene, and then she's getting winded a lot, and Ellie's kind of like, yo, what's up, once you get into that theater, and then she's just like, I think I'm pregnant.
Yeah.
I mean, she was running a lot before that, but there you go.
Yeah.
Suddenly she's not all right with it because the story needs to tell you.
Yeah.
But yeah. I think the thing that I picked up most from it was kind of the weird sadness, the unresolved sadness of Joel and Ellie. I always think it's an uneasy like father-daughter thing. He doesn't really respect what she wants, or what she is, what she should be, what she wants to do. Kind of, there's that scene where you see the flashback and finally they do reconcile, and she tells them that she's pissed, and she explains to them, I would have died. I would have accepted it. It would have mattered. I would have done something that mattered. I would have saved people. And Joel tells you, if it had happened again, I'd done the same thing. And it's kind of, that makes a lot of people go, that makes me go, you don't respect what she wants at all. You just want what you want, Joel. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a controversial thing for the fans, but he basically just wants to preserve her as a version of what he originally had, and I think Ellie realizes that that's not what it is. But once it's done and that thing's been done, all she could do is reconcile with him. She can't stay angry with him. She can't reverse that. She can't now donate herself to science. So she's got to be with Joel. She knows Joel's always going to be there. It's a weird thing. It's a weird thing. I don't know. I found that really weird. That is kind of, she told you what she wants, what she would have done, and you don't respect it. I don't know. That's weird. Probably because I'm not a parent, I guess.
I think, like, for that, it was just him, like, solidifying, like, the reason he made his decision is because that's what, even though it could have been it was a selfish thing because of Sarah and losing her, now having Ellie. It was just solidifying that, like, he doesn't feel anything wrong about what he did. He felt that was right at that time.
Yeah. That's a very complex last couple of hours, that is. The argument of why she goes off to do what she does in that last 2 or 3 hours, well, probably because she's depressed. You don't think straight. You got PTSD, you're depressed. You don't think, like, should I stay with Dean? It's that when she walks around the house and has her like 3 a.m. thoughts, which you don't want when you're depressed PTSD. That's when you make those irrational decisions. It's not bad writing that she goes. I fundamentally disagree with that. The way it's played out at the end, it seems truncated so they can get to the end. But the reason she goes, I'm on board with. I think.
Okay,
she's not thinking right. She's you know.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that from a writing standpoint it isn't justified. I just don't think from like I don't know. I just don't think they spent enough time with it, I guess, is probably...
Yeah.
It felt like it was very, like you said before, rushed. Like, it's like they spent a little bit of time with you, like sitting on the tractor with the kid and spend like a little bit of family time, and then having the PTSD attack, and then immediately Tommy shows up with the map, and then literally next scene, the half-empty bed with Dina, and she's Ellie's packing stuff up and ready to go, and then she's gone. It's like it doesn't even have time to breathe.
No.
The moment to moment, and then the gameplay sequences there, I think, are also rushed, and like you're like, Ellie gets to that city and she's like, okay, there's that tall round building and it looks like it's a mile away, and then all of a sudden you're there. Yeah, it just felt like it was all just it was rushed, yeah. And I think it would have been better as either another section of the game, even though I think the game's already long enough as it is. Or like Derek said, a DLC or something like that, where you go back and do that or something. I don't know. It just seemed like for what it was trying to say, it didn't give enough time for the moments to breathe. And then at the end too, where she's got the guitar and she can't play it and stuff, it just doesn't. Even that felt rushed.
Yeah. So you get to the island. She gets her machine gun and she goes to kill everybody to get to the end game. It's the hospital at the end of the first game. You kit her up with the heavy artillery and she's going to get everyone. It's the same pattern, but it's dumbed down. It's definitely dumbed down with the condensing to wrap everything up. Definitely. So those things stand out and seem a little bit more cheesy, a little bit more on the nose, I think. I don't know whether there's been content cut or whether it was literally that truncated. But there's so many things that make me think it was probably trimmed than badly constructed.
I want to say trimmed because, like, in that end section too, when you let all those prisoners out, they're just like, "Oh shit, she's bit!" Like out of nowhere, it's just like, "She's bit," and then they're like, "She's like, no, I'm fine," and they're like, "All right," and then like that's it.
That's at the point when I feel like she's not really content with going through with it because she lets them all go, whereas she would have taken them out previously. The WLF.
Those were the prisoners, though. Those were the people that they were taking.
Yeah, but she's still been killing the WLF through the whole of the game. So she's already starting to ease off at that point. I don't know. But
I don't think they weren't generally all WLF or the wolves. Those people were just like
ex-Fireflies. Sorry, they were not the wolves. They were the end of the Fireflies, weren't they?
Yeah, I think there were some of the, and then I think just like some normal people too. They would have had to been.
So
no, I don't even think they were Fireflies because when Abby gets to that house because she's heard of this, I think that whole Fireflies thing was a setup for with the snakes or whatever they were called, the rattlers or whatever.
I still think that's thin.
I think they weren't set up well enough that they had this setup that we got led into with the whole Fireflies thing, because then you're in that house and then immediately you get caught, so you kind of can connect those two things there. But then after that, it's just not flushed out. So were there really Fireflies there? Yeah, there was that setup there, but
I thought, wasn't the person on the other end of that radio 100% Tommy?
I don't know.
Well, it sounded a lot like him, and then somehow Ellie had the address on that piece of paper.
I don't know.
Like, how else would she have gotten that written address?
It's not very clear. It's absolutely not
we
very
don't know
clear.
how he found it, but I think that whole radio thing was purely a setup. Like, thinking on it the way like that end part played out, that as soon as they went to come out of the house, they were then captured by them.
Well, but it's slim enough to think that people would go in there specifically to go into the basement behind a cupboard to go and turn on the system to call people to go back out to. It's such a slim thing that somebody would have found that radio that I can't see that it was a setup, if that makes sense. It's so slim that anybody would have found that, other than they were specifically looking for it. That I can't see that would have been a viable trap.
Yeah,
I guess the part that I missed there was, how did Abby find out about it, that it was possibly there?
She sold a gun to find out information that it was there. She sold her big, like, super duper rifle. I think Lev says, "I hope this information was worth it."
Okay.
As they walk into town, he said, "Well, you sold your pistol. That's why you got no. That's why you got no stuff left." So they kind of they got information that it was in there. Yeah, but I think it's so slim that anybody would have found that it's a really weak trap. I mean, there's some questionable writing. I don't think it's that questionable. I don't know, but that's another thing of where everything's just squished. Everything just keeps happening in that last 2 hours or last hour and a half, and it's like, I guess it might be easy to come to that conclusion, but it doesn't make sense. But kind of, here's all the people that you've never seen or heard of before that are now the real bad guys. They're the worst of all of them. I mean, you don't know anything about them.
Yeah, that was, just to make a comparison there, that was kind of like the last season of Breaking Bad, where, all of a sudden you have this ultimate menace that shows up and ends up being that was my comparison there when that was happening. I'm like, okay, so these are going to be, not only are these guys showing up and you've never heard about them before, but they're going to be the worst people that have ever been in this game. And they kind of were, I guess. They were like enslaving people to turn them into the zombie things or something like that, because they had them they had the zombies they chained up and stuff in their courtyards and things like that. I don't really know what
you could actually use them for gameplay.
Yeah, I figured you could.
Yeah, you could pick off their chains and they go and distract everyone.
I just don't like. That's just another thing of like, there's dots there that need to be filled in on like, what are those people actually doing there? Like, what was? Yeah. Are they turning people into them? Is that why they put them up on those poles? Or I don't know.
It's weird. It's thin. They're not the only character, the only people to get the chop. I feel like Isaac is supposed to be a bigger thing than he is.
Yeah, Isaac was kind of like a disappointment all around. Because he's in like 2 scenes of the whole game.
Yeah. And he was so built up through those notes and stuff to where like at least for me, I was like, wow, okay, I hope we get to like come across this guy or have an encounter with him or have something that's going to be that. And then what we get is meeting him and then watching him die.
And he's not the sort of actor you use for 2 scenes. Jeffrey Wright is not that sort of actor. If you got him, you use him. And they barely used him. very strange. So I feel like that's another chop somewhere, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. That moment was strange. I guess as cool as that scene was, where you were riding the horse through the burning village and stuff like that. Wasn't it supposed to be like a small force going in to attack the island? I thought that's what they were talking about, and then all of a sudden the entire village is on fire, and there's
it was weird because
dozens of people.
Yeah, they tossed a couple different plans that you heard about. So that's where it got confusing, because at one point they were talking about a small strike team, which Abby was supposed to be a part of.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, they were also gearing up for like a full scale, like, we're wiping these people the fuck out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isaac decided to go all in, yeah. I don't know if it's got anything to do with him just being pissed off that people were going AWOL, or I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah.
That wasn't really thinned out either. The whole going out, Owen going off on his own. It's there, and I don't know. They're strange. Now I'm looking at it, I can see those holes.
Yeah.
And the bits that are crafted are so kind of played out that I can only think that it's been missed, that it's been cut. So, but if it's not there, it's not there. It doesn't matter if it's cut or not. It's not there, and it leaves questions.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if we'll get any DLC for this or not. It's kind of hit or miss on Sony first party DLCs. Like God of War never received anything, but Horizon Zero Dawn did, so you don't really know.
Quite frankly, even if they did plan it, I think I wouldn't be surprised if they just said "fuck you."
At this point, yeah.
Yeah. Why bother? Why waste the time? You're only going to send us, and that's another story.
Yeah, that's another story indeed.
Don't do that.
So yeah, I guess that's gonna wrap it up. Unless anybody else has anything else they want to talk about.
I think we pretty much hit everything.
Well, I mean, I can wrap it up and just say I was satisfied with it. I think arguably it's for me it's the better game of the two. I found the story more interesting and less base. There was a story as well as just characters I could invest in. Whereas there's not much of a story in the first one. And the gameplay was so much more improved and everything so much more improved that I think it is the better game. But that's probably a controversial thing. They're probably going to be that's a hill I'm going to have to die on, I think.
I think if I had played the game, that's probably where I would have ended up too. Yeah. But also I don't think I probably would have got halfway through Ellie's story and I've been like, I'm done with this. Just because of the way that it just feels like it's even then it was just kind of dragging watching it and seeing that like the enemy encounters don't really change that much.
The aggressive bleakness didn't help. It's kind of
I don't have the investment from the first game in the characters either, so it wouldn't have been enough to pull me through. I think I would have enjoyed it. The time that I spent with it, I probably would have enjoyed it better because the gameplay looked like it was better.
Yeah, it's a lot more heavy-handed with it. It's like you should feel bad for killing these people than something like Spec Ops, I think, which kind of stretches out those things where you're supposed to feel bad for the things you're doing, or you're supposed to kind of. It doesn't really kind of. It's a bit bludgeon you over the head, and it makes it a bit morose in that first few drags of hours, I guess. So yeah you probably would have dropped off. Yeah. I don't know what Derek thinks.
No, it was a good game. I enjoyed it. I totally let Ellie kill Abby a bunch of times when that wasn't supposed to happen, just so I could watch it happen.
You maniac.
You, you,
I think like
you let
three
her.
times. Yeah, I think it was
Yeah.
like 3 times I let her.
I don't know. I'm gonna have to go back to the videotape.
I hope he did. He thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, that
was...
I guess that was a weird bit watching. That must have been weird, especially for you guys playing it. All of a sudden, being on the other end of Ellie.
Yeah, and
Like,
it was
her,
it didn't
seeing
really
her
allude
like
to where it was going to go.
they made her look like just this absolute tiny little menace that is just like running around ducking, she has her bow and is like, you don't know where she is, where she's gonna pop out, and like getting an idea of like what it's like being on the other side of that was probably interesting.
Yeah, it's no different to what you were playing, but you're just seeing it from the other angle. Yeah.
Yeah.
You were
and
you're totally playing that play style.
Yeah, and just seeing her character model from a different perspective was different.
Yeah.
It was just weird.
Yeah, it was definitely a weird thing because it didn't even like allude to exactly what it wanted or how it was going to play out. You were like, I know my initial reaction was like, "Fuck, am I gonna have to kill her here?"
Yeah,
like this is not what I want at all.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought was going to happen.
You knows how to push that button.
But and then 4 hours later, it did finally end.
Yeah, but no, to wrap it up for me, it was a good game. I think like the story of the first one was very like point A to point B. Here it is, to where this one gave you a little bit more. It was more open and with the back and forth and everything. So I think both games are good in their own rights. Especially depending on like what you find and what the person playing enjoys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are very different games in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they really don't. 2 doesn't really exist without 1, right?
No.
That's why it's part 2 and not a complete separate sequel, I guess. Because the events of, well, at least the end events of 1 directly lead into 2.
Yeah.
At least the catalyst of 2.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah. But yeah, that was that.
All right, I guess that's gonna do it for our Last of Us Part 2. Spoiler cast.
Did we go shorter than Days Gone?
Yes, we did. We're probably a little over an hour for this.
That's
because there is no boozer character for me.
Yeah, there was no
one like this one. Dina got close, but
Manny.
Yeah, well, luckily they ducked her out of the story or the gameplay quick enough for her to not be not a Ashley from Resident Evil 4 situation.
Manny was a dickhead. Fuck him. Took a bullet to the face. I'm happy with it.
Yeah, that was an intense sequence, and then it turned when it reveals who it is. That was good. Yeah, good moment.
We're talking about it again.
Yeah. All right. So that's gonna do it, and that's gonna do it for this episode of Voxel Viewpoint. Thanks, guys, for hanging out.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
And if you want to see more, make sure you subscribe to the channel, join the group, check out the Facebook page, yada, yada, yada. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Later.
Thank you for joining us in this very special episode of Voxel Viewpoint. If you'd like to hear or see more, please consider subscribing to us on your favorite podcast app, subscribing to us on YouTube, or visiting voxelvoice.com, where all of our great content comes together in one place. Also check out the Voxel Voice Facebook group, where you can join in on the discussion with a great, like-minded community.